Anything worth copying will be copied. If you manage to build a product that starts getting traction, you will inevitably attract competition and copycats. It's not a question of will others copy you, but when. The problem is that most startup founders don't have any real unfair advantages on day one to defend against these competitors and copycats. And most founders don't prioritize developing unfair advantages until it's too late.
I'm ignoring you.
I'm used to that.
So in this video, I'm going to start by defining what a real unfair advantage is, talk about when you need one, and share one unfair advantage that I think all startup founders should aim to have on day one. Hi there, if you're new to this channel, my name is Ash Maurya. I'm an entrepreneur and author and the creator of the one-page business modeling tool, Lean Canvas. On this channel, I share systematic strategies and techniques for launching and growing a startup. So let me start with what is not an unfair advantage. I review thousands of Lean Canvases a year and see things like we have unique features or we have the most features or the least features. These are usually not defensible unfair advantages because remember that anything worth copying will be copied. This is especially true today when the cost of building new products is at an all-time low. Or I see things like we are the best at a specific skill, or we are really passionate about the space, or we'll work harder than everyone else. These two are not real unfair advantage. The problem with these statements is that they are intangible and hard to measure. And so don't offer a good explanation for how you can make this claim, or more importantly, how you will be able to deter copycats who might also be skilled, passionate, or willing to work hard. It is always better to leave the unfair advantage box blank in these cases rather than stuffing it with a weak unfair advantage, especially when pitching to sophisticated investors. Another frequently cited unfair advantage I see is the first mover advantage. But being truly first to market could actually turn out to be an unfair disadvantage because you have the doubly hard work of both building a new and innovative solution and convincing customers to trust it. Statistically, most first movers fail. Consider this list of successful companies. None of these companies were first movers, but fast followers. Another more subtle pitfall I see on Lean Canvas is listing competitive advantages as unfair advantages. Some people use the two interchangeably, and while they are related, they are not the same thing. A competitive advantage is something that allows a company to deliver a better product than the competition. Unfair advantages, though, on the other hand, are competitive advantages, but with the added properties of exclusivity and defensibility. This is what makes them unfair. To make this more concrete, here is a definition of a real unfair advantage that I really like from Jason Cohen. A real unfair advantage is something that cannot be easily copied or bought. If it can easily be copied or bought, it's not defensible and so not a real unfair advantage. For example, design is one of Apple's competitive advantages, but while good design is hard to create, it's easy to copy, and so not a real unfair advantage by itself. Apple's real unfair advantages come from elsewhere, like their brand promise, which is something they have hard-earned over the years and is not something that can be easily copied or easily bought. So you're probably wondering what other types of things pass this unfair advantage definition. Yes, a strong, hard-earned brand certainly is one of them. Here are a few more defensible unfair advantages. Insider information, things that help you see things that others don't. Personal authority in a space where you're viewed as an expert, or getting endorsement from other experts or celebrities or influencers. And large network effects or economies of scale that deter others from entering the market. Now, as you look down this list, you probably realized the next big challenge. Most startup founders typically don't have any of these unfair advantages at the outset of their idea because many of them take time to develop. And that's okay. The good news is that your unfair advantage doesn't get tested on day one, but when you have traction. So you have some time until then. The bad news is that developing unfair advantages does take time, and so you have to start thinking about your unfair advantage story a lot sooner than you think. Consider Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook. He wasn't the first to build a social network, and many of his competitors already had a huge head start with millions of users and millions of dollars in funding. That didn't prevent him from building the largest social network on the planet. While Mark didn't have an unfair advantage on day one, he had an unfair advantage story. He knew his unfair advantage needed to come from large network effects, This clarity of focus helped him prioritize a systematic launch and growth strategy that helped Facebook build features into their product that helped them eventually realize this advantage. So the good news again is that you don't meet an unfair advantage on day one, but you should aim to create an unfair advantage story that explains how you intend to develop one or more real unfair advantages over time. That said, I believe that every startup should strive to have one unfair advantage on day one, and that is counterpositioning. Let me cover that next. A counterpositioning unfair advantage strategy is built upon the premise that startups always have competition in the form of existing alternatives when they enter a market. The startup's job is to cause a switch from these existing alternatives to their new way. And the best way to cause this switch isn't by positioning their product as better than the status quo, but different. This is because it's hard to win the better game against an established incumbent when you compare yourself to them using their rules of the game. They might already have a brand, and even if your product is indeed better, it's also riskier because, remember, you're a startup. To compensate for this, your product would need to be significantly better, as in 3 to 10 times better, which is not that easy to pull off. For example, if you were looking to compete with a major hotel chain, could you build a hotel that was 3 to 10 times more comfortable than a major hotel chain? Maybe not. This is why it's much easier to change the game and play with different rules. A good new game turns your incumbent strength in the old game into a weakness in your new game. That's what counterpositioning is all about, and exactly what Airbnb did. The promise of a major hotel chain is delivering a consistent experience in prime city locations. When Airbnb positioned its product as live like a local, it turned that strength of hotels, which was consistency, into a weakness. A Marriott or Hilton in Barcelona, Rome, or Buenos Aires looks and feels more or less the same. But with Airbnb, every one of those experiences would be unique and different in those cities. You would live like a local. Counterpositioning involves developing a business model that the incumbent cannot or will not copy due to damage to their existing business. This forces a choice and not a comparison. Airbnb becomes the better choice for some people and worse for others, which is how they won with their early adopters. Another famous example of counterpositioning is Netflix versus Blockbuster. When Netflix launched their mail DVD service, they touted no late fees to counterposition against Blockbuster. Blockbuster could have easily eliminated their fees in response, but were unwilling to do so because these fees accounted for half their income. This allowed Netflix to gain traction and cannibalize Blockbuster's customers, and by the time Blockbuster decided to respond by eliminating these fees, it was too late. Now, the reason I recommend using counterpositioning as the first unfair advantage for startups is that startups already have to formulate a unique value proposition to stand out from the competition in order to attract early adopters. A counterpositioning strategy is a twofer. It piggybacks on your unique value proposition by taking your unique value proposition to extremes. Instead of just being different to attract customers, you can also be so different to deter copycats and competitors. A counterpositioning unfair advantage doesn't deter copycats forever, but buys you time to develop other moats or unfair advantages along the way. Now, if you'd like to dive into this deeper and develop your unfair advantage story, consider joining my 30-day business model design challenge, where I share many more examples and outline 6 other sources of real unfair advantages. I'll link to that in the description below if you're interested. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.